Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Disclosures with Nick and Dave. As always, I am your host, Nick Offenkamp, along with my wonderful co-host, Dave Miller. Dave, what's going on?
Not a whole lot. We're about to talk about everybody's favorite topic. I'm strapped in.
What's that?
Oh, you're unaware? It's taxes.
I don't know everybody's. Oh, gosh. Yeah, okay, so we're talking taxes, everyone's favorite topic.
I think so, yeah?
You hang out with a lot of nerds, man.
I mean, guilty as charged.
Yeah, honestly, that's like 90%, though, of why I so desperately needed you to join the Tartan team is because I am doctor prescribed, like I am allergic to taxes.
Fiscally in the red. Is it a if you just don't think about it, it goes away sort of situation?
That's all my problems in life, Dave.
How's that working?
So far as I'm aware, great.
Well, in the spirit of hopefully being better educated than we have been at certain points in our life, that's what we're going to be talking about today, going through some of the upsides of, we're looking specifically at, difference between Multnomah County and Clark County. So that's Multnomah in Oregon and Clark County in Washington.
Yeah. And Clark County's better, right?
Is it?
I guess that's why there's an episode to record. I was hoping that would be a simple yes/no, and that we could just say, "All right, Clark County it is," and shut it down. But apparently, more of a discussion to be had. So
could be a short podcast. Yeah,
I hear people love those.
Yeah, the attention spans are getting shorter. Yeah. So
this is a podcast for TikTok.
It's a short podcast. Yeah. Shorts podcast.
Okay. So you're saying that there is more of a discussion to be had. It's not exactly a cut and dry Clark County is better, which is kind of surprising to me because here's the thing. Like, I'm fine playing the dummy in the room on this one. Because I am.
It'd be nice for you to take that role for once.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll hold back on the comments as we were kind of preparing with Claude and how Claude wanted to frame you as the the inevitable foil.
The fall man.
Yeah, on all of this.
It's good.
But so every piece of content I think I've ever made about real estate has always been like, why would anyone ever want to live in Oregon? Washington is where it's at, and especially for tax purposes. And we hear that all of the time, but it's apparently more complicated. So I don't know. Where do you want to begin? How do you want to frame this thing up?
Yeah, well, to skip to the end real quick, if you want don't listen to the whole podcast, the quick answer is long-term Washington is better. There's some instances where Oregon and Portland specifically might win. But the thing is, it's a small difference if you were talking sub 10 years, regardless.
Okay.
If you're really only losing Washington if you're doing a real quick sale. And so that's what we're getting into. We'll break down some of the differences. And so maybe you want to just start by explaining, a lot of the people might already understand. Most people know, oh yeah, there's no state income tax in Washington, at least unless you're a very high earner in the, I think, plus million is where there starts to be personal income tax as of a new law passed this year.
Yeah.
But otherwise, people love Washington, no state income tax, and people know that there is income tax in Oregon. The income tax in Oregon is tiered, like federal taxes also. And the bucket I'd say a lot of people are going to fall into is going to be 8.75%. So that's on anything more than 10,000, but less than 125,000. And then it changes. But so for this, you'll see 9.9% on state income for quite a bit of Oregon, but realistically, a lot more people are going to fall into the 8.75%.
That lower tier.
So just on the hop, most people probably already know that because they file their own taxes. Maybe you can explain what are some of the differences in real estate tax that people who maybe haven't bought here or on the other side of the river might not understand.
Yeah, well, I know the most eye-popping number for every Washington seller that I've ever worked with is the excise tax. And especially if you have sold homes in Oregon where there is no excise tax, when you're selling a home in Washington, all of a sudden you see this line item on your closing statement that's, I mean, pretty darn close to 1% of the value of the home. Actually, with the Vancouver taxes, it's more than that. So, like on a $500,000 home, you're looking at about an $8,000 excise tax. On $1 million home, it's more than twice that. You're looking at a $16,855 excise tax in the Vancouver area compared to Oregon, which is a big fat donut.
Yeah. So there's a couple things to break down in a preface to, which is if you're coming from out of state or you're unfamiliar, Washington here calls it excise because it is a tax on, the way they frame it is the privilege to sell property. Back home in Minnesota, we call it deed tax. So the tax is actually on the transfer of the deed to the home. So effectively, they are the same thing. In states that call it deed tax, it's usually significantly less. So back home, it's $33 per thousand on the sale per $1,000 of sale price. So that works out to 0.0033 would be the multiplier. Okay. So on $100,000, on a $330 of sales tax, deed tax per 100,000. Oregon, statewide, does not have a deed tax. There is one exception to that, interestingly, though, which you might want to know if you're looking on the south side of the river, is Washington County, which covers Beaverton, Hillsborough, and some of the western suburbs of Portland, actually does have a deed tax that's very low. It's, I want to say, $1 per thousand. So it's 0.001 is the multiplier. So it's $1,000 per, $100 per 100,000. So a pretty marginal tax. We're talking $1,000 on $1 million sale price. Yeah. So we're not moving the needle a ton, but if we didn't say it, somebody would call us out and be like, yeah, you said there was no deed tax in Oregon. And it's like, well, okay. So, and I'm not actually exactly sure what the history of all that is. I think it existed before some state laws came.
Grandfathered in kind of deal. Sure.
So, but in general, to sell a home in Washington, we're looking at a significant cost increase over selling a comparable home in Oregon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're tiered, right? So and we'll link to this in the show notes if you want to look at the brackets, but up to $525,000, 1.10%, where the median home, or at least most of the sellers that we're working with, they fall into this next tier, which is like $525,000 all the way up to $1.525 million, which then the tax increases to 1.28%, and then it just starts to go way up. If you're from basically 1.5 to 3 million, you're 2.75%, and basically above 3 million, you're at 3%.
3%, and it is tiered effectively. So it's 3% on every dollar above 3 million. So people, that's a common confusion about tiered tax brackets, is they think once you hit a certain amount, whatever that next tier is, they're like, oh my gosh, now I'm paying that. You're not. You're paying 3 on every dollar above 3 million in this case for Washington's excise tax.
Yep, and about 0.5% of that is local, like for basically Clark County.
Correct. So next tax, keep it rolling here, is property tax.
Yes.
So this is the tax you're paying every year to your local county, and then it gets distributed out to the different city. Well, there's city level tax too. We'll get into that, but it's for county services, for helping the government run. It's not a state level tax. What does that look like in Clark County versus in Multnomah?
Yeah, this is where I got my numbers backwards a little bit, thinking that the excise tax was about 0.9%. It's actually throughout Clark County, your property taxes annually are about 0.9%, which is, roughly $9 per $1,000 of market value. So on a $500,000 home, if that's the assessed value, you're looking at about $4,500 a year in property taxes.
Okay.
Compare that to Multnomah County, bit higher, 1.02%. So if we're looking at that same home, instead of $4,500 a year, you're going to be closer to $5,100 or so.
Sure.
So $500-$600 a year difference on the same home just by being in Multnomah County versus Clark County.
Yeah, and so it's also important, as we're giving you all these numbers, that we're talking averages here. These numbers do change slightly based off of what city you may be in on both sides of the river. There may be what are called local levies, and there are some notable ones in Multnomah County that are worth getting into. Basically, city level tax that gets added onto these numbers that we're giving. So we're more giving right now. We're more talking general averages across each county to sort of be able to compare and contrast the cost of owning one versus the other. So right now we're significantly higher on excise or transfer tax in Washington.
Yep.
And then as far as property taxes go, we're doing a little bit better in Washington than we are in Multnomah County.
But probably not so much that like the property tax probably isn't going to make the difference for most people, right? Like that excise tax, at least right now, that feels like the big one.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people would assume, and I guess we'll keep talking about some of this and see how it all stacks up.
Okay.
But some of those local taxes I was just mentioning a second ago, there's a lot more of them in Portland specifically, and so you need to check. You need to check with somebody who's familiar with your area and familiar with the numbers of any given county, because all this stuff does change based off of where you draw the line. And the same is true in Clark County too, where a portion of your property tax is based off of which school district you're in. So
are you trying to tell me right now that just because we have real estate licenses and microphones, we're not qualified to be CPAs?
That's actually exactly what I was saying. Don't sue us, please.
Seek professional tax advice before making any life-changing decisions.
That's basically every lawyer's advice, is to always preface, right?
Yeah.
And so we're keeping the lawyers happy if we had any. So you need to know your local address, because it could change, and most cases it's not going to be a significant change, but these are all numbers worth knowing. So Portland has a SHS tax, which is, I'm trying to remember, what does it stand for? Something.
Let's look it up.
He's going to look it up. There's also in Multnomah County, it's the Preschool-for-All tax. So it's abbreviated PFA. And that has been a point of contention, from what I understand currently, and keeps getting kicked back and forth in the legislature.
Just so I can have my moment of brilliance, SHS is the Supportive Housing Services tax.
Supportive Housing Services tax. There you go. So that is supportive SHS, supportive housing service, that is specific to Portland. That
Okay.
doesn't necessarily cover all of Multnomah County. Multnomah County PFA tax, that's everyone in Multnomah County.
Preschool for all.
Preschool for all. So these taxes, they're not entirely agreed upon. I'm looking at my show notes here. Currently, PFA is 1.5%, and it's scheduled to potentially increase by 0.8%. So that 1.5% would become 2.3%, and they currently are saying it's going to happen in January of 2027. But there's argument in the legislature. They're worried about continuing to add taxes to homes in Portland and driving people out. So currently, as it sits, it's 1.5%, but they're talking about increasing it.
Yeah, I mean that's like as we were preparing for the episode, we'll link to this article, but there's an article called Portland's Weirdly High Taxes, and Portland has the second highest combined wage tax in the United States, only behind New York City.
Yeah.
And the Eco Northwest, which is a consulting group for the Multnomah County, they found that tax avoidance is the primary driver of high earners leaving Multnomah County. And so that's a big part of the conversation, especially like on this preschool for all and some of these taxes. One is that if they keep increasing it, how many more homeowners in Multnomah County are they going to drive out? And two, why would they increase the preschool for all when the number of kids in Multnomah County keeps dropping like precipitously? You know, it's kind of wild.
It's an interesting question, and one I know I'm not qualified to answer. And not that you were asking for an answer from me, but I think your point stands that the taxes, Portland, it has become known as a place with a heavy tax burden.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Keep Portland weird, man. Even if it means weirdly high taxes.
Weirdly high taxes. Good. So just wrapping up the thought on Portland in terms of just owning property. We have slightly higher property tax at a county level, and then let's just call it general local politics. It seems that they're more interested in trying to provide more services for their people at a governmental level, and they're willing to put some tax down based off of which county or if you're in the city or not through property owning. So we're currently sitting 1.5% for PFA plus the 1% for the SHS tax is 2.5%, and then that's getting added on to your already close to 1% property tax.
Yeah. So I mean, your income tax, you're at like 11.4% if you're kind of a median household income. And that's just your income plus then the property taxes, compared to Washington, where your income tax is precisely, I don't know, I'm not great at math, zero.
Yeah.
Zero. So yeah, you multiply that by whatever you earn, and your property tax is still zero. I'm sorry.
That looks good. Yeah.
I said property tax. No, your income tax.
Your income tax is
still zero. Which people like.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. That's good. So what this is adding up to is it's not looking good for Portland. Is that what we're discovering? So, okay. Hopefully we've laid it out. There's a lot more local tax, but Portland doesn't have any sales tax. What about that?
They don't. And here's the thing. Portland has a lot of jobs. I mean, you compare like the local economy of Portland, Oregon to Vancouver, Washington, and Portland just absolutely dwarfs Vancouver. For all the growth Clark County has seen, like it's still like the biggest. You've got Nike and Intel and a whole bunch of massive companies that are all Portland based. So a lot of folks are like, I will just live in Washington and then commute into Portland. But if I'm not wrong, that might not be such a clean way of avoiding some of the tax ramifications.
You still have to pay the tax man, Nick, even if you live over here.
So you can't hide from them just across the Columbia, or
you can't.
They'll still find you. So okay, but I know that is a question. Like a lot of folks that like, man, I've been working at Nike for 10 years, and but Camas, Washington sounds great. If I move to Camas, can't I stop paying Oregon income tax? And you're saying no.
The answer is maybe. As is the clean answer to all things.
Yeah, it depends.
It depends.
Always.
Nuance.
Yeah.
Disclosures.
Man. Yes.
Shameless plugs. If you work physically in the state of Oregon, they will still, they'll try, pay your taxes. They still require you to pay tax on money earned in the state of Oregon if you are physically there. So interestingly enough, what that means, as far as I understand it, again, not a CPA, is if you are fully remote and you do not cross over into Oregon, you are not liable for that tax. Now, I'm not, this is where we'll draw the line on exposing ourselves to looking like we're giving any more tax advice than we already are. I'm not sure how many days a year you could potentially go into Oregon. Like, oh, we're going in for a conference meeting at Nike. And now all of a sudden they're saying, well, you're a physical employee present at the company. And now they want, even if you work 99% of your days remote. I would think that there would be some sort of line, and that's something you'd want to consult your CPA about. Yeah. But in general, if you have a fully remote position, the whole live in Washington and work in Oregon is definitely a plausible route for a tax haven.
Okay. So as long as you can work remotely and have it cleared with HR and your CPA, there is the real possible arbitrage of still having your Portland, working for a Portland employer.
At least as it stands currently in 2026. You never know what laws are going to change, and then they're going to say, any work done here for this company, we want a cut of. There's lots of places in the world that are playing that game and trying to make that happen. But at least as it stands now, you do not need to pay taxes if you work for a company the same way if you work for another company on the other side of the world. They're not. A lot of countries aren't necessarily there. They could be headquartered somewhere else specifically as a tax haven, and you're not going to pay income tax to that country.
Sure.
Like a lot of the tech giants are tax havened in Ireland.
But I'll flag why this is so important and for our discussion here is because there are a lot of folks that, as they consider, do I move to Washington or do I stay in Oregon if you're working Oregon-based job? If you can't qualify as a remote worker and you still have to pay those Oregon taxes, this comes back to then the property tax. Yes, the property taxes are a little bit less expensive in Clark County, but not significantly less. And if you're having to spend hundreds of dollars a year in gas by commuting further, plus, I don't know if you've ever caught the I-5 or 205 bridge in rush hour or having to cut across from Beaverton back up to Clark County. I mean, that can easily add an hour and a half, 2 hours to your commute.
It is brutal.
It is not fun. And so, especially then when we're talking timeline, you'd mentioned at the very start of the show of that, really, if this is a short-term home purchase, you're not planning to be somewhere or in that home for more than 10 years, this is where the math can start to skew towards, hey, actually, even with all of the apparent savings from Clark County, if you're not saving on income taxes, you're not saving enough on property taxes, and you're going to have a big excise tax due. Well, maybe if you work in Oregon, it makes sense to live in Oregon too.
That could be the case. So before we draw that thread out, I want to go back and highlight Oregon's main upside, which we accidentally breezed past, which is it doesn't cost money to buy anything there.
Oh, yeah. Sales tax.
And sales tax, yeah. And so...
Is that part of the why there's no like excise or deed tax as well? Is that consistency on their part?
It's hard to say. I'm the longer time goes on, I'm become of the opinion that they're going to get their money out of you one way or another. It just depends on how good you can play the game. And so a lot of people say, well, you live in Washington and then do your shopping in Oregon. I don't know anyone who can be bothered to go across the 205 bridge from our little corner of Clark County to buy anything unless they know it's like a $1,000 plus purchase.
Yeah.
Which is like, oh yeah, like sure, it's nice to have that option if you want to go buy a car or something. You're refurnishing your house or buying appliances for your kitchen. I think a lot of people's money's going towards groceries and gas right now.
Yeah.
And
a car won't even work because you have to license it in Washington.
Yeah, well, there you go. See, back to my
thesis
that they get
holes.
it.
Yeah,
they get it from you eventually. So people will say, I hear a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, you get to like go to port, you can hop the river and then not pay any sales tax. I haven't seen too many people doing that.
Electronics and furniture, man. I will just anecdotally, they did try to open a Best Buy in Vancouver, over in Fisher's Landing. It lasted for 9 months and then it went out of business because for whatever reason, like people will not go to Oregon to buy their groceries. But if you live in Vancouver, you will absolutely travel to the Best Buy to buy your new iPhone.
It's true. It's not nothing. It's in Washington, I think it's 8.75% on most goods, and I'm trying to remember what the exact breakdown is.
And it changes a little bit from zip code to zip code as well, because there's some different city.
Yep. So some of what you might consider essentials don't get taxed, like medications and other stuff, but a lot of, and I think food.
No taxes on bananas, man.
Yeah, unless it's a prepared banana at a restaurant, and then there's tax on it. Which aren't you glad that there's CPAs in the world who handle all of this, because it's hard to keep track of all of it. Okay, so we're looking and we're saying income tax in Oregon and Multnomah County, it's steep. All right. But how much of all this adds up to it's clear the longer you'd be living in Multnomah County, you're going to be paying more. How long does it take for that to offset the cost to buy and sell in Washington, the excise tax, which is the main difference? Any idea?
You're asking me to do math. I'm not that guy, Dave.
Not that guy. All right. No. Well, I'll tell you. But what we can tell you is that in general, Washington is better off on the whole, unless you take the income tax out of it.
Okay.
So if we're talking you're in your later years, you're retired, maybe you're just needing to live somewhere for a short while, the break-even point on Washington versus Oregon is around 9 to, we'll say, 15 years here. And so what we're saying is the increased cost in local and county level taxes being more than a comparative house, and so we're talking Multnomah to Clark County, it will take roughly 9 to 15 years, depending on the price of the home. It would be longer the more expensive the home is, because your excise taxes in Washington is larger.
Yep.
But in general, that increase in tax slowly whittles away, if you think of it as adding it to the bucket of the excise tax, right?
Yeah.
So the conclusion to draw from this is if you're living somewhere for just a little, if you're planning on buying or selling a home and you're thinking you're only going to be there a short amount of time, that excise tax in Washington it's a serious amount of money.
Yeah.
And it's something that could really eat up any potential appreciation you have in your home in Washington. We're working on a calculator right now to help people decide if renting and investing or buying is a better option for them. It doesn't matter how. There's little slide bars like some of the other stuff on the tartanteam.com to help understand where all these numbers fall, because even guys like us who aren't really the CPA guys, but need
Want
to
to be able to
understand
run
this,
some scenarios.
it really helps you visualize what those costs are. But regardless, on that calculator, when you're looking at renting and investing, the difference you save versus buying, it almost never pays in Washington to buy if you are not planning on holding it for at least
8-9 years.
Yeah, I think 7 was the lowest I could get it to really make sense. And that's just because the excise tax is significant. And also that's also factoring in all the commissions and the closing fees and all the other stuff. So if you're interested in that, we talked about that in the last podcast a little bit. We're going to get this calculator up so you can see does it make sense for you based off of how long you're planning on staying. But in general, it sounds like you were right. Washington is better. How's it feel?
Well, it feels great, but I do think still that the most important factor there is the income tax piece. And so if you are somebody who has a job in Oregon and it has to be Oregon based, it's an office job or you're working retail and you have to go in there and you're earning in Oregon, that excise tax piece is a real factor that you have to consider as to whether or not it's going to make sense to move to Washington. And I would say, from what you've put together here, if you're not planning to be in a house in Clark County for 9 years at least, and you're still earning in Oregon that whole 9-year period, it probably is going to be more economically beneficial to you to stay in a home in Oregon.
Yeah. Something else worth noting here is both states do have estate tax. So we're talking real long term. So that maybe back up before we get to estate tax. You are correct. In general, as we sort of disclosed in the last podcast, don't buy if you're not planning on staying. That advice is local. We're talking out here on the West Coast. Housing is too expensive comparatively to the cost of rent that it doesn't make sense. I was using the rent buy calculator and running some examples from my hometown in Minneapolis, or you could apply it to a lot of other smaller cities that the housing stock isn't as expensive. It actually makes a lot more sense to get into a starter home a lot quicker, just because the overall housing cost is lower out there and you can start earning and saving a lot more money. Out here, it doesn't. So if somebody's telling you it's going to be the best investment of your life and just do it because they're looking for a quick commission, don't rush into anything. So that said, if you're either a local and you've been here, or you've been here a couple of years and you're like, this is it, I love it here in Portland Metro, Southwest Washington, wherever you are, the long-term play is to buy in Washington. All of the tax benefits, it's pretty clear, and that's probably not very groundbreaking to anyone. Anyone who has a cursory understanding of the different taxes that are involved probably already knew that. So the last thing to mention is to put maybe the final coffin in I'm staying here for forever until I die, is the difference in estate tax. Oregon, on the whole, taxes any estate that, the way they frame it is it's a deduction of $1 million. So the first $1 million of your estate is free, and then everything, or is tax free, I should say, it wasn't free to get, is it's tax-free, and then everything beyond that is taxed between 10 and 16%.
Jeez.
So
Okay.
if you're trying to leave anything to your kids, or your spouse or whoever, and there's a lot of arbitrage ways and things, their strategy here to try to reduce that amount. But in general, you need to understand that is something at the end of your life, that if you're hoping to pass anything on to family.
And you got more than $1 million in assets.
Which isn't saying very much,
no.
because the average home in Multnomah County now is, I think, $590,000 is the median home price. So if you pay your house off in 30 years and then, you assume appreciation is around 4%, you're going to be close to that just in the cost of your home. And who's to say, in 30 years, if
they may increase
comfortably
it,
middle class means being a millionaire, there's a real chance that threshold gets moved up. But currently, if you're somebody who's later in life, that's worth knowing. It's also worth knowing that Washington's deduction goes up to $3 million currently.
Sure.
And so that's a significant amount. Now, I will say Washington's top end currently goes up to 35 for estate tax, but they're trying to move that back to 20% as the top.
So if you have
end.
more than $3 million of assets in your estate and you pass,
it could be anywhere between 10 and 20%.
Yeah.
So definitely a better tax haven if you're, say, more middle class. If you're a really, really high net worth individual, then that higher percentage currently at 35 might make less sense to settle here. So another thing worth considering. But
if you're that high up on the earning table, you probably got this sorted.
You're
probably not needing Nick and Dave to tell you.
You probably have a CPA who understands this a little bit better than us.
Maybe even a family office.
That's likely the case.
Can I throw one more wrinkle at you?
Yeah, no, let's hear what you got.
So, worked with several house flippers. House flipping has been something that I've been interested in myself, and have been involved in some of those projects, especially in the Twin Cities. How does the excise tax in Washington versus Oregon perhaps change the math for somebody that's wanting to do real estate investing and house flipping?
It makes it difficult, to say the least. It's all in a certain way. There is no capital gains tax, and we kind of glossed over that. There is a potential for capital gains tax in Oregon, which most people are, unless they're staying in their home 40 years, they're not going to get any of that. So that in Multnomah County, you could potentially run into capital gains tax on the sale of your home if it's over the federal exclusion, which is $250,000, or if you're single, or $500,000 if you're married. You have to be in your home a really long time at a 4% appreciation rate to get to go over $250,000. So we breezed past that a little bit. In Washington, there is no capital gains tax. Everything is excluded at a state level. You could still have capital gains tax at a federal level, but once again, you have to stay in your home for quite a while in order to hit that $250,000 or $500,000 if you're 250 single, 500 married. The excise tax does make it hard. And I'd say, in my experience looking at the housing stock out here comparatively to back home, there's not really a lot of flippers here, specifically because of that. If you buy a distressed $400,000 or $500,000 house in a nice part of town, and you sink $100,000 into new finishes, sprucing it up, and then you try to get $650,000 or $700,000, $10,000 to $15,000 of excise tax. That's a significant amount of money towards. That could be more than 20% of your profit, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It seems to me that there's a lot more new construction and land development happening because there's more money in that than there is in
true house
buying and flipping.
Yeah.
I don't know, any other input on that? It doesn't seem to happen as often here, unless it's a unless it's a very high desirability location.
Yeah. Yeah. We see it more on like the multi-million-dollar homes along the Evergreen Highway, just there on the Columbia River, because there's some cool old 1960s, 70s homes that need a ton of renovation, and you put the money in, and then
They got a view of the river.
Yeah, like those are unique. But it seems like if you were really wanting to do house flipping, probably looking in Portland just because of the tax benefit.
Something, yeah, absolutely. It's something worth noting for sure.
Yeah.
The flip or the short hold definitely wins in Portland.
Yep. Yep. And I think that's the helpful, I mean, it's kind of ending where we began, right? But yeah, if you're working in Oregon and you're not planning to be in the home for more than 10 years, buy in Oregon. Soon to be licensed there can help with that. But if you're able to work remotely, just the income tax savings alone by moving from Oregon to Washington is going to be, giving yourself at least an 11% raise, plus a bit of a reduction in property taxes. Sure, you got to worry about excise, but only when it actually comes time to sell. And if you stay in the house for 10 plus years, you really don't have to worry about it. Yeah, they're going to ding you on sales tax, but at least when you got to make that trip to Best Buy,
yeah,
Portland's not far away.
Good. Well, hopefully that was helpful. Quick breakdown of what the differences are. It sounds like the initial thesis you poised was correct, though.
Yes.
Washington, which
I love it when you tell me I'm right.
Yeah, well,
doesn't happen.
It has
as
to
much.
happen eventually, right?
Eventually, yeah. Even a broken clock, right? Twice a day. So
that's good.
Yeah. This is great. Well, if you would like to talk more about your situation, thetartanteam.com/book. We would love to help run these scenarios. Links in the show notes to some of the tools that we had referenced, articles, that calculator that Dave mentioned, that'll be live by the time this episode goes live. And then, as we've qualified many a times, you probably don't want to book a call with us to talk about the minutia of your tax situation. But if you are looking to connect with a good CPA, we've made a few good connections locally and would be happy to share those contact details with you. Just go ahead and reach out. Dave at thetartanteam.com, Nick at thetartanteam.com. You can reach either of us that way too.
Yeah, hopefully if you're interested in buying, real quick before we go, there's something we have to touch on, which is at the end of the day, I think one of the bigger takeaways is we're in a 10-year scope. We're really splitting hairs here on the dollar for dollar difference, right? It can be significant, but depending on for a lot of people, it's not going to be that different. People aren't they're if you're very focused on saving and you have really strict financial goals, you might you would probably pick Washington. But in general, money isn't everything, right?
Yeah,
I guess that's maybe we do a whole podcast and talk about how you can save this much money if you live here and you do this thing, and it's like at the end of the day, loving where you live is way more important.
You could have saved $112 had you have moved across the river, despite the fact that you're sacrificing being 30, 40 minutes away from all your friends and family.
Exactly. And so we absolutely don't want this to come off as, oh, yeah, you got to live in Washington. You should live where it makes sense for your lifestyle. And if that happens to be in Washington, we want to help you find a great house that the numbers make sense on. And it's more so just have a conversation, get people thinking about, all right, well, what are all the actual implications? Because so few people ever get that explained to them clearly. And maybe if this wasn't the clearest, like Nick said, we'd be happy to talk with you about this and point you to people who can really dive into this in your situation. So I just want to put that preface in there of like, hey, it is money, but money's also not everything.
That's
So,
right. And if it were, Washington probably wouldn't be the best, like if really like tax optimization is what you're going for, there's probably some southern and Midwest states that might be worth a closer look. So it's a point well taken. You got to live your life. And yes, these are factors, especially when you're comparing metros or areas as close to one another as Multnomah County and Clark County. But all of this stuff is figured out in conversation. And that's really what we exist for, is to just help you think through these things well, be sounding boards, and come to decisions that you feel glad you made 5, 10, 15 years down the line.
absolutely.
Rock on. Well, to that end, be sure to subscribe to the show, share it with somebody that you know thinking about buying a home, and get in touch with us. We'd love to chat with you. See you in the next one.
Bye.